By the way, there's about a 20-second delay from Zoom to YouTube. I just learned that today. All right, we are live. Let me drop the link real quick.
Chinmay, I think you're muted.
Thanks, Sasha. Hi, everyone. Was just saying hello. We'll get started in a few minutes, so just hang tight. Alrighty, it is 5 minutes past the hour, so let's get started and kick this opening ceremony off. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Synaptic Hacks. We are super excited to see you all today. This has been in development for many months, and it's really awesome that, we are in the moment. So, first, icebreaker time, because we have a very wide community joining us from literally across the world. So, in the Zoom chat or in the YouTube live chat, we would love to hear what state or country, and state and country, are you repping today and tuning in from? Drop it in the chat. Personally, I'm in Northern California right now on the West Coast of the United States, sunny California, except it's nighttime right now. Namaste from India, Connecticut, some East Coast folks. Y'all are up late a little bit. Vietnam, Delhi, Alabama, Oman, Thailand, Jordan. A lot of Indian, South Asian folks representing, wonderful. Awesome. And next question is, what areas of psychology and neuroscience are you personally interested in exploring, whether inside or outside of the scope of Synaptic Hacks? We all come from a very wide range of interests as well, and our whole event is based on interdisciplinary neuroscience exploration. So would love to hear what you're personally interested in. All right, cognitive neuroscience, educational psychology, neuroengineering, computational neuroscience, wonderful. Technical neurosurgery, wow. All right. Mathematical neurophysiology, behavioral neurosciences. Not quite sure yet? That's perfectly okay too. We're all students and we're all learning here. And hopefully maybe you'll have some insight into some more fields by the end of the weekend. So thank you everyone so much for sharing. And we're really excited to get to know you more over the course of the weekend as well, over Slack, by email, over these calls, speaker sessions, and a lot more. We'd like to kick off by telling you briefly about our organization that is hosting Synaptic Hacks. We are a student-run international nonprofit organization called Simply Neuroscience that empowers students to get involved in pursuing the brain from neuroscience and psychology perspectives, and especially through a three-tiered framework of education, outreach, and awareness. And our motto is, we are pursuing the brain and unlocking the future, one neuron at a time. And of course, all of y'all are also part of that. So here's a really cute picture of our team. Some folks are here live today. There's Sasha, who's our Chief Operating Officer, wave at the crowd. We have Kaushik, who's our Chief Financial Officer. We have Tisa, I believe, who's probably, her camera's turned off, won't put her on the spot. She leads our Action Potential Advising Program with Dina. My name is Chinmay. I am the founder and Chief Executive Officer. And there's a lot more folks behind the scenes of Synaptic Hacks. Want to give a special shout out to Intra, Siddhi, Ria, Raj, Gurnur, and so many other folks, Shreya, Lena. There's a whole village behind the scenes. So shout out to everyone who's attending here live and who's currently asleep right now. So what exactly is Synaptic Hacks? This is a 3-day online neuroscience hackathon taking place from July 30th to August 1st. And a quick note that most of our timings are in Eastern time. Our aim is to engage student innovators like yourselves in thinking critically about the role of neuroscience and psychology in society. So we're really emphasizing the real world applications this weekend. Now, our hackathon has 3 core values to keep in mind while you're ideating, while you're building, and while you're presenting. We really want to get you guys involved in thinking about service, social justice, and sustainability. Now, here on the slide, we see the quite literal Google definitions of what these 3 words mean. But as we know, there's a multitude of ways that these concepts are applied in everyday life and affect the way that we go about our education, we go about our advocacy work as students and innovators and change makers in our community. So we invite you to explore what service, social justice, and sustainability mean to you. Quite at a literal level, you might think about sustainability. Maybe the first thing that comes to mind is environmental science and sustainability in that way. But there's a myriad of ways to also think about sustainability. So I really encourage you to think outside the box and draw personal connections. And you want to hear about that journey. Now, here's the big reveal. We know that you have been waiting for these prize tracks reveals since quite a few weeks ago. So we're finally here. Our hackathon has 5 main prize tracks that students will be building projects around. Now, I do want to preface this by saying, to be a part of Synaptic Hacks and join our community, you do not necessarily need to submit a project. You can also tag along and join us for all the different speaker sessions and whatnot that Sasha's going to tell you about later in our slides presentation. But if you are interested in submitting a project and working on it over this weekend, getting it in before the deadline, you're going to want to pay attention here to these 5 prize tracks and determine what exactly you're more interested in. First one, medicine, public health, and research. We are going to be examining current developments and understanding more about the neurological basis of infectious diseases, which is often misunderstood or studied less. For instance, there's a lot of talk about the brain fog that follows COVID, the long-term effects on the brain, and you might take that in a variety of different directions. How have globally collaborative scientific efforts bolstered our understanding of the brain? Without collaboration, we wouldn't be here today. Science is rooted in group team efforts. So we want you to reflect on how exactly global collaborative efforts, several institutions, academic programs have furthered their understanding of the brain. I also just want to mention here that these are all example prompts that we're going to keep running through. And you don't necessarily need to fit exactly into one of these. So even as we're talking through, I want you to think more about what are other ways that I can flip this. So let's keep moving on. Just keep that in mind. How can clinicians and scientists address and lessen the potential harm when engaging vulnerable communities in research studies? Now, if you look back at the history of science and neuroscience even, there are some dark periods in terms of the ways that science is not really, always cared properly for underrepresented, marginalized communities. So as the innovators of the future, how are we gonna fix that? Reflecting on the past and looking into the future, we wanna hear about your recommendations. Last but not least, how can we promote preventative brain health for one second here, for conditions such as Alzheimer's disease, many neurological conditions, thinking about starting earlier in our lifespan even. Brain health is something that we can focus on today and tomorrow, and think about in the long term, maybe lessen our risk of developing Alzheimer's. So think about the present and how we can promote health in the present that translates into the future. Second up is mental health and wellness, which we know is a very popular prize track. A lot of people are excited about this one. And we're proud to be partnering with Inventa magazine on this prize track too. So shout out to the Inventa folks in the audience. You guys are awesome. First up, how can we most effectively discuss and address stigma surrounding mental health across different cultures? Like we explored before, we're coming from various parts of the world, various cultures, various communities. And with that, we really want to focus on what are these communication methods that we can emphasize to better further understanding and take away from these taboos that have been constructed over time, right? So we're going to construct and deconstruct those wellness taboos. Again, this may be a historical reflection. This may be looking into current news media, wide range of ways to go. Third, how do we empower general public, lay members, family members even, to focus on brain-body wellness while combating pseudoscience? A lot of blogs out there, psychology, neuroscience blogs, often focus on concepts that maybe aren't the most scientifically reliable. So how do we combat that and ensure that our fellow non-science friends and family and peers and everyone out there can still fulfill their best, brain-body wellness as possible without necessarily falling trapped to these, unfortunately? Now, we're in a virtual age. It's the COVID-19 pandemic still. And this virtual environment, obviously our hackathon's virtual, it's not going away anytime soon. So how can we incentivize healthy living and eating in a virtual age? Moving on. In a post-pandemic world, an optimistic one, how can we increase access to mental health and wellness resources? We saw that there was a very big divide in terms of people being able to access mental health support and therapists in person before COVID. And now when that's moved online, some certain populations have been more easily able to access these mental health support resources and get clinical help from professionals. But for others, that has become even more impossible. So think about accessibility, think about those barriers and how we can continue to expand the conversation for a post-pandemic world. Next up, how can we tackle the issue of social isolation and loneliness? In fact, a lot of public health organizations actually cite social isolation and loneliness as a problem that's scientifically relevant, not just something that we feel. So think about neurobiological and social factors for this phenomenon, especially among a lot of Gen Z folks, millennial folks. This is an issue that maybe a lot of us face. So maybe something that's even personally relevant to many folks out there. Next up, explore the connection between the brain, stress, and homeostasis. Again, going back to that mind-body connection there, stress really has a different way of playing out on different people's bodies. And how can we really care for the brain when we are stressed and our body is under stress? I think something that a lot of us experience is exam periods and your body is really going haywire a little bit. So how do we take care of ourselves from a neuroscientific perspective and really ensure that we can use that knowledge to the best applications possible? Next up, neuroarts. How can we utilize a neuroscience lens to further art therapies for clinical patients? Now, you might notice that this has some overlaps with the medicine, public health, and research track. For any of these tracks, one thing I want to clarify is if you are stuck between, I'm not sure if I want to submit to one of these price tracks more, we want to encourage you to think about the methodology. If you are looking maybe more so into a lot of the literature reviews, a lot of academic papers on the medical side, maybe searching through PubMed and more of the medicine heavy databases a lot, using a lot of jargon and focusing more on the clinical symptomatology, then maybe you're more geared towards the medicine prize track. Versus if you are focusing more on, let's say, how are scientists analyzing different musical patterns in the brain and imaging, let's say, maybe less so technical focus and more looking at how different techniques have played out, more on the broader scale, then you maybe may lean towards neuroarts a little bit. We know that's still a gray area. So if you need help in figuring that out, you're happy to drop by one of our office hour sessions and mentorship sessions, and we'll be talking about that later on. So don't fret. Moving on. How can film, theater, performance help develop our understandings of neurological conditions beyond the textbook definitions? Now, we know there's always misrepresentations of a lot of different conditions in the media and the movies, but there's also in some cases, some really lauded performances out there that really bring to life lived conditions. So look at the pros, look at the cons. There's positives, there's negatives. And thinking about moving on, recent developments in neuroscience principles such as neuromarketing fields, advertising, consumer behavior, all of these different strategies, think about how those are affecting our everyday life, kind of subconscious influences in some way. Is that beneficial? Is it actually harmful? We want you to, ponder about that. And last but not least, for neuroarts, architecture. A little bit different, but what might future cities look like if we considered neuroscience as the basis for our architectural design? Now, if you're an interior designing fanatic and you absolutely love it, you're the kind of person that loves Pinterest boards, we want you to take that step further. Think about how do design schemes come together, for instance. A lot of research going on about that, and building spaces that are actually promoting wellness. A lot of different avenues to go there. Maybe sustainability is coming in a little bit, so think about that. Tie it back to those core values. Alrighty. And one that's really personally relevant to our organization's mission, Simply Neuroscience's mission, is thinking about neuroscience education and outreach. We want you to focus on understanding the gaps in neuroscience and psychology education at the secondary and post-secondary level. Tell us what these gaps are. What do you see in your own life, for instance? This also ties into one of the later questions for this prize track in terms of there's a lot of differences in educational systems from when we grow up, or we go to college, for instance, the countries that we live in. So one of the issues in promoting global neuroscience education and outreach efforts under an umbrella kind of a vision is that there's obviously differences out there and no student's journey is the same. That's why one of our big emphasis is on, we want to help you succeed in your individual brain journey. And we want you to kind of implement that vision here as well. How can we embed neuroscience-based lessons into early curricula? You might even think, pre-K, kindergarten years, 1st to 6th grade even. Oftentimes grades and age levels that may seem like they're not exactly grasping neuroscience, but maybe think twice about that. Is it beneficial to maybe not focus on the neuroscience jargon as much, but the applications? Like, this is what happens when you go to sleep. This is what happens when you eat food, and this is the effect it has on your brain, and the neurotransmitters are flying around. One way to go. And how can we bring attention to these gaps in a productive way? Kind of implied that a little bit, alluded to that. How can we really bring this to the forefront of a lot of different university institutions, academic centers, organizations, that this is something we need to care about? Continued. We're focusing on the youth to youth aspect, but we also want to think about the teachers and educators' impact on students, right? I think a lot of us can attribute our development in neuroscience and our growth to wonderful professors, teachers, and mentors. And how can we equip and empower our educators to facilitate the highest quality neuroscience communication possible in the classroom setting? So maybe reflect once again on your own personal experiences, gaps that you saw, maybe things that your teachers are really wonderful about, and the modes of mentorship even that can contribute to that. And then last but not least, multilingual science communication is very well needed in our current world. And we want you to envision the future of multilingual neuroscience development, resources, outreach, barriers in translation. This also kind of ties into cultural barriers in translation a little bit. So think about that whole bubble out there. There's some really wonderful science communication papers that simple Google search can bring up related to multilingualism. And then finally, the last one, we've been talking about neuroscience education, but there's actually a field out there called educational neuroscience that brings the neuroscience principles into not necessarily learning about the brain as much, but focusing on study strategies and tips and techniques to actually help students study better and learn better as students. So it's kind of a dual approach there. We'd recommend that you quite literally search into Google, what is educational neuroscience, and read more about it. It's a very up and coming field. And we just want to put that disclaimer there to not really confuse the more of the outreach education efforts with necessarily this implementation of the educational neuroscience field. So there we are. And we're almost there, folks. Neurotechnology. One that also a lot of people are really excited about, brain-computer interfaces. They seem like they're on the news all the time. Companies like Neuralink are making, big moves. So we want you to examine the relationship between traditional research and academia, maybe one at universities, private research institutions, and the pace at which neurotechnology companies and independent startups are advancing our understanding of the brain through using these different softwares and hardware technologies, right? So think about that relationship between the two. Do they influence one another? Are they kind of butting heads a little bit? It's a complex relationship. I want you to dive into that. Also considering the rapid pace of neurotech developments, some of which are really wonderful, but some of which are also can be, potentially harmful. How do we strengthen the ethical standards and safeguards? So this could be looking at, let's say, more of a governmental level, engaging legislators. How do we get to that level? Science moves quickly, but also very slowly. So the balance of pace, again, is something to put at the center of your project there. And we also want to invite you to analyze the translation of neurotech into different spaces. A lot of neurotech companies are focusing on clinical applications, for instance, but there's also industrial and recreational purposes as well. So with that very wide range of applications to settings, what kind of questions are arisen from there? When it comes to recreational, maybe more commercial purposes like that normal consumers like us could purchase, you may want to think about purchasing power. You may want to think about, is there some sort of surgical or very high hospital bill kind of a situation that may occur? Who actually would have access to these technologies in that case, even if it were supposedly open to the general public, anyone can get them. So think about access as well there, depending on settings. You may also think about perhaps neurotechnology being equipped for military purposes for soldiers in combat, and what kind of questions that raises as well. So a lot of different spaces to think about neurotech in. And then last but not least here, philosophy, which I think oftentimes does not get its full limelight, but philosophy, ethics really go hand in hand. And so how can philosophy better inform our understanding of neurotechnology? I think there's a lot of discussion and discourse about kind of what exactly is the mind? We know the brain, kind of, but what exactly is the mind then, right? So language also, differs from language to language, but I think English itself has so many different contradictions and nuances and just thinking about processing the higher level of the brain. So we invite you to think about that. You may want to go way into the classics. You may just want to focus on modern day neurophilosophers, really up to you. So take your trek through history or the present or the future. So voila, that is our prize tracks. I know that was a lot. Just a reminder that this presentation is being live streamed onto the YouTube. So do not fret if this seems like a lot. We will also be adding all this information after this meeting's over to the participant guide. So if you have not read that already, we highly recommend that you do. It has all the technical logistics requirements and whatnot that we are going to briefly run through here, but we recommend you sit down and spend some time with it. And we did not update the prize tracks on the participant guide up until now because this is our big reveal, but the prize tracks will be on there hopefully within the next hour or so. Alrighty, so we're gonna get into the nitty gritty a little bit. So a lot of big questions. I'm sure your brain is like, oh, where do I go? And we want to tell you a little bit more about the requirements, the scope of what your project is gonna be, because we only have a weekend, unfortunately. So 2 avenues you may want to take these. Probably noticed that we are calling Synaptic Hacks a hackathon, but as you know, hackathons have a wide definition these days. So we're inviting you to decide whether you want to go the technical or the non-technical route for your project. What do we mean by that? Non-technical projects could maybe just focus on more on the literature, more on analyzing sources without necessarily implementing programming, coding, softwares, hardwares, any of that realm, because we understand that a lot of students, this is their first hackathon, this is their first big neuroscience competition, maybe you are still starting out in neuroscience, and we understand and respect that to get to that level in neuroscience, it is pretty rough and it does take a lot of time and dedication. So we're giving you that choice. If you want to go the technical route, we have included some suggestions in the resources section on the participant guide to look at potential databases and repositories, coding lessons available. Unfortunately, not really a focus. We do have several mentors who are experienced in that realm, but once again, it is quite difficult to be able to learn entirely from scratch and analyze a full database with coding lessons in a weekend. So we have linked a couple of resources to Hack Club's workshops on our participant guide. So we recommend looking through some of those. You'll see that one of the lists I think is called Awesome Neuroscience, and it's a whole library in itself. So it may take you more than a couple minutes to look through that. What exactly is an example of a technical project? Great question. So let's say you are really interested in the medical public health research track, special interest in Alzheimer's, let's say. I'm personally a little bit biased here. And you wanted to maybe look at certain genes, not like genes, but like, biological genes that are implicated in Alzheimer's, and maybe flip that into some sort of neurotech exploration. It's up to you. I don't want to give you ideas, whoops. But maybe if you're interested in looking at gene expression, different genes implicated in Alzheimer's, maybe looking at comorbidities, so like diseases and conditions that may arise in patients with Alzheimer's, I would recommend checking out the Allen Brain Atlas, or Brain Map, I believe is the name. They have a lot of open source data. And so that technically does not require as much coding there, but it is, you're analyzing a database, you're analyzing a repository, you're actually doing like the kind of these techniques, you're putting them to use that haven't necessarily been, done in literature before. We consider that more of a technical project. Now, there's a whole spectrum of what that means, right? We will not be grading technical versus non-technical projects any differently. We understand that maybe you get halfway through this big chunk of analyzing this database and then you're like, oh my gosh, this is not going anywhere. But you still have your background and your vision together. We're gonna still accept that. We have no sort of qualms about that. Technical project would be moreover focused upon physically coding visualizations to convey information about a given price track, whereas a non-technical is more literature-based. Sure, I think that's a good way to think about it. Yeah. Yeah, keep those questions coming, of course. So, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, you may only select one prize track to submit your project to. Fortunately, I know all of them seem really cool and you could probably tie them all together in some way, but alas, that's not the case that we can accommodate. Now, for the project, you're obviously going to be doing a lot of independent exploration, a lot of just surfing the internet, surfing Google Scholar, PubMed, all these different sources, maybe even looking through news and different reports and interviews from scientists who've been working in this specific niche, excuse me. And we want you to, by the time you're turning this into the judges, to have two things ready for us, to showcase your learning, showcase your ideas. One is a summary report. This is going to be a plain old Google Doc, nothing fancy. We just want Times New Roman, plain format. This is all in the participant guide. And we want it to be 500 words or less. 500 words does not include references, so feel free to go crazy. Make sure you're deciding all of your references correctly and avoiding plagiarism. Also have some information about that on the participant guide. We want to hear about the background of your project. Why exactly are you choosing this certain question? What's kind of already out there in the world? Because obviously, we're not in an echo chamber. There's probably scientists out there who have some insight to add on these certain topics, right? So we want you to reference them. And we want you to tell us more about your methodology. That's a big word, right? So exactly how did you go about deciding from, I want to do this question, to thinking these are the gaps, to thinking this is where we're going to go, to thinking what are some counter arguments. I believe mentioned in the guide kind of a who, what, when, where, and how framework for going about these projects. So who are you affecting? Who's going to be involved in the ideation and the implementation, and kind of go with that don't go on that checklist, you know, who, what, when, where, how. Answer all those questions. Summarize that. Please don't use bullet points. We want to hear your written out process, just like a scientific paper would be, though you don't need to have it be that jargony. We're all still students here and our judges understand that as well. I'm going to be in a recorded presentation video will be 5 to 10 minutes long. We extended this timeline a little bit because if you have a group that you're working with, we'll talk about the groups later, then you all would need some time to speak and share your individual parts. So in 5 to 10 minutes, we want you to kind of walk through a little bit of the summary report, but imagine it more like you're pitching to someone. For those of us who are unfamiliar with kind of like what is a pitch, what is a slide deck, kind of that situation, you want to pretend almost like you're in a fancy boardroom, right? Maybe if we were in person, we could have this, but unfortunately we're not. You're in a fancy boardroom. Maybe Sasha's my investor. She's looking to actually invest maybe $100,000 into this new idea that I have. And I have to tell her, why is this the perfect project to invest in? Why not maybe Kaushik's project? I'm sure Kaushik's project would be just as equally wonderful. But you know, why me? Why this? Why right now? Why is this unique? You want to really tell Sasha, like, this is why this is so creative, this is original, and give her, you know, things in a nutshell. You don't want to give her like, here's my 5,000 sources of background information, because Sasha's going to lose her interest, right? You want to catch her in that short period of time. I'm almost thinking of Shark Tank now, but this is not Shark Tank. Please don't worry about that. There's your reference for inspiration potentially. So again, more information about the presentation video in the participant guide. And we can take questions about this. Recording softwares you may want to use would be, I think Canva has a recording option for presentations. You can even use Zoom and screen share with everyone. There's also like screen recording softwares that you can just literally type into Google. Unfortunately, there's not some coming up on my mind right now. I think Jaga said OBS or some other softwares. So if you run into any issues with that, please let us know. Worst case scenario, you could always film on like a mobile device separately on your screen, and we'll try to figure it out. So tech issues, don't worry, we'll figure it out together. This fourth point here is just a recap of some information you might want to add here. Let's see. Okay, before we move to prizes, I'll just briefly talk about the team info, and then I'll hand it over to Kaushik to talk about prizes. So y'all have the option to work individually on your projects if you'd like, but if you would like to work with other Synaptic Hacks participants, then feel free to work with up to 4 people in total in the group. So I can only work with 3 other people, 4 people total in a group. You could have 1 other person, you could have 2 other people, you could have 3 other people, up to you guys. And if you're looking to form a team, we will have a team formation session right after this call. I just realized we're running a little bit late, but that's okay. It'll be right following this session. And we also have the team formation channel on Slack, the event Slack workspace. Link is in the participants guide. And feel free to message, reach out to one another. There's going to be several other socials and different things going on over the weekend. So keep an open mind. You may meet some really cool people. I think there's a lot of folks from last year's Ideathon that we hosted that are coming back this year and may form completely different teams. So for the course of the weekend, you get to meet some really cool people, or if you're interested in working by yourself, that's totally fine as well. We will be accounting for generally evaluating, you know, if it's a 1-person project, we understand that you will not have as much brain power collectively as a 4-person group. So we will evaluate that accordingly. So don't worry, you're not expected to work. 1 Sasha is not expected to work as much as 4 Sashas. So please keep that in mind. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kaushik to tell you more about prizes.
Thanks, Chinmay. So looking at how enthusiastic all of you are, we were able to avail some really cool event perks and prizes with the help of some of our sponsors. And this sort of goes in hand with the technical, non-technical aspect that Chinmay mentioned in the previous slide. So let me provide a run through to all of our event perks. Uh, right off the bat, all the participants who submit a project by the deadline, they'll be receiving a digital certificate of recognition after the hackathon's over. And a lot of these are also listed in the participant guide, which Sasha just sent on the chat. So you can also take a look to that. And so one of the important event perks we have is by the Knowledge Society. The Knowledge Society is a innovation program that's based out of Canada, and they're a community of young innovators, and we're arranging an applicant scholarship with them, and that could be something that all of you could use and use in the future. We also have a 80% off on the AMDTX app of Mobio Interactive. It's a meditation app, and they really use some cool neuroscience and neurotech aspects and into creating the user experience. And we are also offering 1 month free premium access to Echo AR. So for those of you who don't know what Echo AR is, it's a new platform that allows you to create VR and augmented reality software. And this is something that you can use for like one of few of the neuro arts and neuro education tracks. And we also have Coom. And so I saw someone in the chat was asking about whether we'll be having coding classes. Now, Coom is sort of like a web development resource. And if someone wishes to take a technical route towards this hackathon, then they can definitely make use of Chrome. Now coming to the prizes, we also have some exciting prizes. The first one is by Volare Labs, and now since this is a hackathon, we wanted to make the prize as easy for the winners, so you can develop the projects even after the hackathon is over. Which I'm sure, like the projects will be really innovative projects. So Volare Labs, it's like a incubator for hackathon winners, and we'll be offering $400 scholarships for winners, and this we'll be choosing the winners in coordination with all our labs. And we also have other sponsors who are willing to offer prizes for winners, such as BrainGrade, who are willing to offer coffee chat with one neuroscientist from the community. And it's sort of all of these awards that go in hand in hand, that make this hackathon more exciting. And finally, we also have certificates of award recognition. And winners will be getting this along with their normal certificates after the hackathon's over.
I just want to clarify about Asylum Connect here. We will be sharing more info about their database and resources in the guide as well. And so these specific gift cards will be awarded for projects that include an assessment of their database or inclusion of their resources in that perspective in some way, shape, or form, basically. Just to recap, Asylum Connect uses tech to help communities fleeing persecution due to sexual orientation or gender identity, and helps to connect them with legal, medical, mental health, and social service providers. So quite a different spectrum of resources to tap into there. And also, before we move on to the rest of these Simply Neuroscience provided prizes, I want to clarify, with 5 prize tracks, we are splitting all of our participants into 2 age categories to account for potential differences in experience and expertise. As a reminder, at this time, we're only able to accept submissions from participants who are between the ages of 13 to 25 years old, because we were approximately putting the cutoff at graduate students or recent bachelor's degree graduates. But if you are close to that age range, but not quite, maybe 26, 27, yet are still in early graduate school, let's say, please reach out to us and we can chat through and see if we can make a special exception. So let us know if you have any confusion about that part. Excuse me, losing my voice slowly. But our two age categories, one is middle school, high school, or the equivalent in your home country. Second is undergraduate and graduate, so bachelor's degree, seeking maybe a master's, PhD, MD, equivalent degrees. There would be a total of 10 winning projects. So that means there could be, project means a whole team or an individual, just 10 winning projects. And 10 projects will be named as runner-ups. And the reason why we're doing so is centered on feedback and really, like Kaushik said, developing your work further, which is a perfect segue into the next slide.
Yeah, and some of the other prizes, and these are some of the areas that you could be more excited for. So obviously, we'll be offering a mentorship coffee chat with the Simply Neuroscience leadership team, and this is also a place where you can discuss your ideas further because we have some really talented and knowledgeable people in our community. You will also get priority access to our advice at the simplyneuroscience.org email hotline, which is the email hotline that we use to clear neuroscience related doubts, a career in neuroscience related doubt, those kind of things. And finally, your projects, they will be featured on all of our social media pages and a newsletter. So that's 20,000 plus followers and subscribers. And this will all you will also receive the opportunity to present this project at Simply NeuroCon 2022, which is the annual online conference of Simply Neuroscience, which will be taking place next year. And some other things along with those are a write up about your project on our blog. And you'll be able to share your presentation video, like the recording, on our YouTube channel. And Simply Neuroscience offers the Simply Neuroscience has this program called Humans of Neuroscience, in which we interview some really passionate people who have done some innovative work in neurotech, neuroscience related fields. And you will receive an opportunity to be interviewed by one of our HON staff members and the Synapse podcast. So I think this is it. I hand it back over to Chinmay so she can discuss the schedule and timeline further.
Awesome, thank you. So timeline really quick, and Sasha's going to tie this into the broader schedule of the hackathon. So we're currently July 30th at 12:44 a.m. and we're announcing the prize tracks. And the project submission deadline will be August 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern time, New York City time for reference. We highly recommend you use any time zone converter to make sure you're on the right page for when exactly the project submission deadline is. We'll also be pinging you in the Slack channel with a reminder, and I believe we'll also be sending an email reminder. The first round of judging will be taking place from August 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern to the end midnight of August 3rd. The second round of judging to determine tiebreakers and start to synthesize all the final results will be concluded by August 8th, and winners will be announced on August 8th. Now, we know this is a little bit atypical from maybe the usual hackathon timeline you're used to, where winners are announced on the evening of the final day. But since our focus is more on, we want to try to give you feedback from our judges that's actually implementable in the long run. And we want to spend more time, allow our judges to spend more time with your projects and not worry about work responsibilities and time zone conflicts. We're extending that timeline a little bit. So we ask for your patience during that week. I know it's tough, but I'm sure it'll be worth it to receive that feedback. Looks like we have some questions coming in. Okay, no worries, we'll get to those. And Sasha, over to you.
Great, thank you. So I hope you guys are getting excited about all the information we're giving in terms of prize tracks and the prizes we're offering. But like Chinmay mentioned, even if you're not interested in submitting a project or maybe you don't fall within our age range, there's still so much for you to do these coming days. I'm going to drop a link in the chat right now with our event schedule. And that has all the information on what's coming up. And if Chinmay, you flip to the next slide. Here is our full kind of schedule for the next coming days. This can kind of be split up into three main things: speaker workshops, mentoring sessions or office hours, and then some social events like networking, the team bonding experiences like the slideshow karaoke, which is on there. We really were intentional with trying to provide as much as we could for you to gain out of this hackathon beyond the competitive aspect. So a lot of our speaker workshops are very diverse, ranging from neuro arts like the poetry of neuroscience to neurotech. We have very specific topics like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, lessons. So make sure to get a good look at what we have offered on the schedule here. I know we're a bit short on time, so I won't go through everything, but again, this information is available on our website through the link that I sent in the chat. And yeah, and I guess I can talk a little bit more about the office hours and the mentorship sessions, because I think that might be really helpful for competitors. But basically, the office hours are a great time to clarify any questions you have about your project. If you have any questions about the requirements or expectations, if you have any concerns in general, just please keep in mind that our feedback will be limited so we don't provide an unfair advantage to certain groups. And then same thing with mentoring sessions. We have incredible neuroscience and psychology professionals that have volunteered their time to help with expert advice. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely hop in on some mentorship sessions which are offered throughout the next couple of days as well. So I think that's everything for the schedule, and I think we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so next slide is a big thank you to our sponsors and supporters. Without the incredible organizations and companies listed on this slideshow, this event would not have been possible. Events like these are free and accessible to you all because of our sponsors and their generosity, and the prize tracks as well. So we just want to give a huge thank you to all of our sponsors here, and these sponsors are also listed on our website as well. Okay, and we've thrown a lot of information at you all, so please fill the chat with any questions. The Slack is also always open for any questions as well. There's a specific channel on there, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible with anything there. But we can go ahead and take questions from the chat right now.
So,
yes.
Okay, looks like we have quite a few to go back in time through. So let's keep scrolling through. Let's see here. So just to clarify with the presentations, those are going to be recorded. The large group of participants, and again, with time zone changes for the judges, we're asking that everyone submit a recording of their project, a video, in order for judges to review on their own time. And as Kaushik mentioned, we will be inviting all of the winners to present live at Simply NeuroCon, hopefully next summer. It'll be here before we know it. And you're also welcome to submit your presentation video to be shared on our YouTube channel. All of the different opportunities that we mentioned on the Simply Neuroscience end are really flexible. Obviously, we're your events organizing team, and we're really happy to walk you through and chat more about, what you think is best for sharing your project with the community and whatnot. So, all right. Sasha, do we have any questions on the YouTube live as well? I don't have that open because of echoing sound.
Yeah, no questions from the YouTube live as of now.
Okay, all righty. So we have a question here that says, can we pitch research studies to explore one of the sub-themes of the hackathon, especially studies that demand financial support? So I think pitching research studies is absolutely wonderful, but we do want to see some sort of effort towards putting that into motion. We understand that for some, you need financial support, logistics support that goes beyond, again, the scope of a weekend-long hackathon. But whether that's implementing other segments to your video, to your summary report that talk about what are maybe action items that you could see the research being implemented into. We don't just want this kind of to be the end result is I want to present this at a neuroscience conference and call it a day. We want to see those ripple effects coming out into everyday life, into the community. So again, the whole aim is on real world application. And so while scientific papers and presentation are a real world application, we want to see more of that coming to life on the community scale and beyond just the academia world, I think is a good way to put it. All right, I think we see one that says, will you give feedback to all the projects? Our hope is that judges, we'll be having our judges onboarding meeting on Sunday early morning. And hopefully we will be able to give feedback to most projects, but it really depends on the scale. We are not quite sure how many folks are going to be submitting projects right now. So our hope is that we'll have enough specific constructive feedback to share with all, but it may take time to roll that out to participants. So maybe with extended time, we would be able to. Hopefully we could give feedback to most folks before the end of August. roll that out. There's a question here about what is the category going to be for the prize tracks if my team has 2 high schoolers and 2 undergrads. I believe there's a couple examples in the participant guide, but basically if you have half and half, you would be geared towards the two undergrads take precedent, and you would lean towards the undergraduate graduate prize track. If you have 1 undergrad student, 3 high school students, then you're going to go towards the middle school high school track. So when there's an equal balance, we're usually going to lift that up to bump it up to the next age group. So question here about beginners, high school student submissions will be taken into account on a separate basis. Well, no. So what I meant is that the only separate basis I think that we're going to keep an eye out for is if you are a 1-person team versus a 4-person team. We understand that the middle school, high school track, the students submitting projects, they may be from a less, I was going to say technical, but that's not the right word, from a less experienced perspective. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case at all, but we're just maybe considering that there's less years of experience, so you may have less background knowledge to draw on if you're on the younger prize track category. But if you've been in neuro your whole life and you're really ready to share that knowledge with us, kudos to you, that's wonderful. So the middle school, high school projects are going to be judged separately from undergrad, graduate. You're not going to be pitting against one another, if that answers your question. Do you think this requires our full 2 days, or does someone have a shot even if they miss a few sessions? I'm assuming by sessions, you mean like guest speaker presentations. We are starting this opening ceremony at midnight Eastern, and it's quite late for Sasha and I too, because we wanted to give you guys the most time, accounting for time zone differences, because we understand it's morning in, let's say, a lot of different countries right now. Well, it's night in the US, North America. So it's up to you, really. You take advantage of the weekend how you see fit. We will not be making any judgments on if you want us to spend 1 day on a project and call it a day. You think you've had a good experience? That's wonderful. We're happy for you. So it's really up to you, to the scale and the detail that you want to take the project. If you just want to hang out, have a great time, attend speaker sessions, attend networking socials, it's up to you. Yeah, and please do sleep. That's why we're trying to give you more time, because we want you to sleep. We don't want you to pulling all nighters. No, thank you. Okay. For the different projects, can it be anything as long as it fits in the topic title, or does it have to be one of the specific prompts? It does not have to answer one of the specific prompts. Those are concrete directions that we want to give you. I just want to make it clear that if you want to go out on your own route, put together your own question, your own topic, we want to make sure that you elaborate exactly why on the route you're taking, because judges are aware of these example prompts for the prize tracks. So if they say something that's like, not exactly fitting into one of those question recommendations, doesn't mean that's a bad idea at all. It just means you may need to set up more background for them to understand where you're coming from. Why did you take that executive position? So feel free to go anywhere you'd like. When we do our pitch, is our ultimate goal to make the audience care about our research and help them understand the rudiments of our topic? Yes. You want to think of, so there's mentioning Sasha as the investor. You want to imagine Sasha as someone who's not coming from a science background, let's say. So she's a lay person. Let's say she won the lottery. She has $100,000 that she wants to invest in your project, right? To someone who's not in the science world, you want to break down that jargon. You want to take that out. You're not going to talk about like this XYZ gene and Alzheimer's, yada, yada. Don't confuse people, right? You want to tell them like, these are what genes are, these are what's significant to Alzheimer's, but don't focus so much on like, I did this PCR, this is what a PCR is. Well, we're not going to do PCRs, that's a bad example. We're not in labs right now. But just as an example, you don't want to be too technical when it comes to the pitch part. On the summary report, you want to have that kind of a balance. You want to showcase your knowledge and the different specific methods that went into making your project what it was. But at the same time, you want to understand that not all judges share the same level of expertise in maybe a certain niche as you do, right? So Judges have a wide range of experience, and they will be looking at projects that are more relevant to their own field of comfort, their comfort zone. But that being said, one of the essentials of science communication is being able to balance that sort of jargon and layperson communication. So have at it. Does the project have to be started during the hackathon? Could it be a project that was started before July 30th? No, it must be started now and from here on out. So to that, it's still 29th for me, but it's 30th for most everyone, I'm assuming. So quite literally from the opening ceremony of the hackathon to the submission deadline is the only time that your project may be from. Please don't cheat. The whole concept is that we want to be innovating from fresh in a limited time frame. And if you can get so far in a limited time frame, then you can imagine how you can expand that in the following weeks if you'd like to go that direction. So just for fairness, we want everyone to create a fresh project. It could be an idea that maybe was floating around in the back of your brain, but it can't be something that you've worked on extensively. Yeah. Is the prize for TKS a full scholarship? Don't worry about questions, you're doing great. No, it is not a full scholarship, it's a partial scholarship. We actually just received that information earlier today, so we're still working out the logistics, and we'll be sharing the full picture of what that is with you once we have that information. But it's a partial scholarship for hackathon community members who are accepted to the program, I believe. That's the full scale. Is there a separate rubric for each category? So we're not providing like a full scale rubric, like the kind that you might see in a high school English class, because it's kind of redundant. And we already know there's a lot of text on that guide, so we don't want you reading more text. I think in the project evaluation submission requirements section, something titled like that towards the very end, you'll see some bullet points that are like, what are judges looking for in your project? And I think it's almost verbatim to what the judges will be filling out on their evaluation forms. They're basically going to be rating projects on a scale of 1 to 10 to how well they exemplify something. And then we'll be totaling that. We're going to have 2 judges look over every project to reduce potential bias. And then we'll be taking those totals, moving up to the second round, basically. So no separate rubric for each age category. We're just looking at differences in experience level. So yes, that answers your question. Can people who haven't signed up yet still sign up and participate in the event? Technically, the registration form closed at 8:59 p.m. We didn't hit the close on the Google form because we were all on the call a little bit before then. Technically, the form is closed. That being said, I'll make a teeny tiny exception. And for the folks that we see hopping off of this call, maybe in the last 5 minutes after the deadline was due, we will send invites out to those folks, but I'm afraid we can't be more flexible than that, just to be fair. A lot of questions. Sasha, was there anything you'd like to clarify just from any responses, anything to add on?
I'm checking the YouTube chat real quick right now.
Awesome.
And we have a question that says, should our projects be centered around the prize tracks as a whole or the specific subtopics under a given prize track? So I can go ahead and help answer that question. So just to clarify again, like Chinmaya mentioned, the subtopics that we gave are purely examples to help you kind of brainstorm what ideas kind of work underneath each prize track, but you definitely can go beyond those suggested topics as long as they kind of fall under that topic. And so in terms of the specificity, kind of what you see as the example prompts are how specific you want you guys to get on in terms of these prize tracks. And so I hope that answers the question. She might feel free to elaborate more on that.
That's perfect, yeah. Let's see. I have a question about, for coded projects, are we expected to submit our code example GitHub? Preferably, yes. GitHub is a great source to go. And mentioning earlier, if something crashes and burns halfway through and you're like, just GitHub is not looking great for me right now, we understand. Please just acknowledge that in your summary report. Oh, one thing to mention, science always has limitations, right? Like there's no perfect project. There's no perfect methodology. And if you want to acknowledge, like, I ran into a dead end on this topic, and I actually, or maybe I found contradictory results or contradictory scientific literature out there, or, you know, information out there that actually, you know, does not really match with what my hypothesis was. We want you to acknowledge that rather than going back and changing your hypothesis in retrospective. I want you to practice good science, and, you know, acknowledge failure, acknowledge limitations, acknowledge those crashing and burning parts too. And in fact, I think that'll be looked at more positively than if you were to just go back and erase and pretend like everything is okay. So what are examples of non-technical projects? We included some earlier in the discussion, so maybe I'd recommend going back and watching that part. Can we use first person? Absolutely. No preferences on first or third person. There's just some, I think what's on the guide right now is just like Times New Roman, either MLA or APA format, I believe, for the references, just so we can standardize like what that looks like for judges, easier to read. I think double spaced, because yeah, I don't think we want to be reading Comic Sans for a large number of projects. So just to have that kind of a clean formal look. But you're welcome to be creative with the summary report. If you want to start off with a narrative, for instance, and give us that kind of an introduction, then break down the you know, the XYZ, the ABCs of what exactly you did, we're happy with that. That being said, you don't need to turn it into an award-winning summary report for English class. You don't need to worry about that. Can a non-technical project be like a slideshow? So we're hoping that for the recorded presentation video, that you actually, well, if you run out of time, you don't have slides to share, but you just want to talk through the project, that's absolutely better than nothing, and we want to hear that. But if you have the bandwidth, we would hope to see some sort of slides presentation as part of your recorded presentation video. Slides presentation, presentation video. So I would say incorporating the slides there. I'm not quite sure what you mean by non-technical project though. Maybe clarify in the chat. Where can we find the prize tracks for reference? Those will be added to the participant guide in a little bit. So those will be on there, and you'll have this video on the YouTube channel. Are we allowed to have paragraphs for our summary report? Can we choose to incorporate images, diagrams in our report? Sure, absolutely. We will not count, maybe I'll double check that this is clarified in the doc, but if you have captions, those will not be included in the total word count, obviously. We don't want you writing like 5-paragraph essays in your captions though, just to bypass that, obviously, is your common sense. But if you want to quickly label any images that you found relevant, if you created like a flow chart, let's say, of like how you went about doing, like you went from XYZ place to ABC place, how did that go chronologically? You're welcome to do so. If doing kind of a map of like, this is what the broader field contains, and this is like what my specific niche is, and you want to have that as kind of like an inverted pyramid diagram, whichever way you'd like to take that, absolutely. Should a non-technical project be a research paper kinda, or a Google side? Yeah, I would recommend going back in the video just to save time, and going back through the video and reviewing the information about the summary report and the presentation. And the summary report and presentation info is all set for you in the guide. I know I've referenced that like a million times. We've all referenced that a million times, but it really is like your one-stop shop. So I want you to read through that. It'll make for a very large peace of mind, promise. Hang out a couple minutes more. We're just going to go straight into team formation, just bonding a little bit after this call, so you're welcome to hang out. We won't be live streaming that on YouTube, obviously, because we're probably going to be going into breakout rooms, hanging out, mingling, getting to know one another. So we'll be pausing the live at that point. So just want to make sure we have all our questions through, so we can pause the live stream at the appropriate spot. So give it another minute. If you're gonna hang out for the team formation session in a few, maybe go get some water real quick, get some food. I'm gonna do a little happy dance. If we don't have any other questions, we would actually love to take a picture with everyone if you feel comfortable. Just a group picture. It's always really fun to take pictures. If you feel comfortable turning on your video and you want to smile at the camera, feel free to go ahead. Or if we're shy, that's also okay. You can always take a photo at a later point. All right, maybe folks are asleep because honestly, the East Coast is asleep right now. And we see some faces, we see some faces. All right, let's see like maybe 10 more seconds if everyone wants to turn their camera on. If not, no worries. We'll just take a picture together. Good to see faces though. All right, the wave is coming. Sasha, would you be our photographer? I feel like you're always the expert with these.
Yes, for sure. I'll wait another like 10 seconds just in case anybody else wants to turn on their camera. Also, quick thing while I'm waiting for more people to turn on their cameras. I just want to reiterate again, if you don't have any questions right now that you can think of, but have some later down the line, please feel free to drop them in the questions channel in the Slack, and we'll get to them as soon as we can there as well. Okay. Going to go ahead and take the picture. I'm going to count down from 3 and then I'll screenshot the picture. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay, great. I'm going to do the second slide real quick. Okay, I'm doing the second slide. 3, 2, 1. Got it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to drop our email into the chat. If you're on Slack, we'd actually prefer if you could Slack us in the #questions channel, because it's also really helpful for other participants to see what questions have been asked before, and just carry on that train. And our email is events@simplyneuroscience.org, short and sweet. It may take a little bit longer to respond to emails than Slack messages because we'll have notifs turned on for Slack, but we'll be sure to get back to you in hopefully a few hours for email. Great. Right. I've run through my checklist. Nothing else. I think we're all good to go, folks. So team formation follows right now. Our next event, let's see, let me pull up when is the crash course happening? The crash course hosted by our very own brain resource creation team is going to be quite literally a crash course to neuro, covering a really wide range of topics. And that's going to be happening at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time on the 30th, which may be today or tomorrow for you, depending on where you are. So please refer to the schedule spreadsheet. I will drop that in the chat. There it is. The Zoom link should be standard. If there's any issues, run into any Zoom difficulties, we'll keep you posted. So please just keep an eye on your email, on your Slack, whatnot. And please check your spam folder. You notice that a lot of those welcome emails went into the spam folders. Gotta love Google. So please just keep an eye out on your spam folder for us in your inbox. Alrighty. All right, folks, we'll say goodbye then. I'm going to stop the live stream.